Welcome to the JB Media Digital Drop-In, which is our free monthly webinar. I'm really excited to have everyone here today so we can talk about remarketing and conversion tracking for Instagram and Facebook ads. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah and I'm the lead instructor of the JB Media Institute. And I'm here today with my co-founder and head of the JB Media Group marketing agency, Justin Bellamy.
Hey Sarah, hey everyone, welcome.
So today we have a pretty specific topic we're going to talk about. I want to just quickly sort of give you an overview of what we're going to discuss today. Our focus is really on remarketing and conversion tracking within the Facebook and Instagram Facebook Ads Manager. So even though this is a rich topic, we could probably do a much longer webinar on this topic. And of course, if you're familiar with the Facebook Ads Manager or the Facebook's Business Manager, essentially there's a lot of different things involved in this. So we're going to really highlight some of the key things that I think people are either questioning or not fully aware of and need a little more information about. Essentially, as we go through the presentation, as usual, you will get a recording of this webinar along with a copy of my presentation. So I've included a number of links that if you really need how-to instructions, you'll be able to go back through those links and dig into the very nitty-gritty of the how-to. So again, in the interest of time, we can't necessarily dig into that today, but we will have plenty of time, I believe, at the end of the presentation and throughout for you to ask any specific questions that you have, and Justin and I will do our best to answer those. So like I said, we're going to talk about the options that you have when it comes to retargeting and conversions. I have some screenshots I've put together, and then those links will really give you those step-by-step kind of processes of setting up some of what we talk about today. But like I said, I know this is a rich topic. We're probably going to open up more questions than we are going to answer them, but hopefully you'll get a vision of how the Facebook and Instagram advertising system can really evolve forward for you and help you connect with the people that are the most qualified for your products and services. For some of you, you may have attended our digital drop-in in December that had to do with holiday ads. And Michelle Porterfield was here. So I just wanted to give her a shout out as a really amazing expert. She's been working with Justin for some time now, but she really brought up an issue that kind of inspired this webinar today, which was many people forget that when it comes to advertising, you really have to have two pieces of your advertising in place. One is ads that are out there really creating brand recognition and brand awareness, making people aware of your products and services, and then campaigns and ads that are actually focused on getting people who've already had at least one touch point with you to convert in some way, whether that's sign up or make a purchase or whatever it is. And just, her comments on that really kind of inspired me to have a deeper discussion of this, because I think it's important for all of us to think of our social media advertising campaigns as fitting into those two pieces. We want to make people aware of who we are and what we do, and then we actually want to convert them into a potential customer or lead or something of that nature. Typically, if somebody's never heard of your brand or your business or organization, it's going to be really hard to convert them the first time they interface with an ad. So I think it's important to have your expectations really clear, that when you are driving engagement and you're driving awareness, you're not necessarily going to get conversion out of that. And that's where remarketing becomes such a powerful tool, because it allows you to target the people that have already had those previous touch points. Now, I want to start really quick for anybody who's newer to remarketing. And this is something that I had a colleague of mine kind of discuss with me after I had promoted this webinar, but I thought it was an important point. So just understanding the difference between remarketing and retargeting, because these words have become fairly interchangeable, but they don't actually mean the exact same thing if you are in the marketing sort of industry. So are these two the same? They really aren't. Remarketing is a broader sort of umbrella term at this point, and in the past has often been associated, honestly, with emails and email promotions. Retargeting becomes sort of a piece of the remarketing puzzle that is really specifically focused on the advertising portion of remarketing. So it really has to do even more specifically with putting ads in front of people who have visited your website in a lot of ways, right? So just an interesting little thing to keep in mind, even though it's funny, the person I was talking to blamed Google for making people think that these are exactly the same thing. So I just wanted to clarify that actually what we really are talking about today is a form of remarketing, which is retargeting inside of the Facebook and Instagram ad manager. So just a little thing to clarify language. I feel like our industry has a lot of lingo, so I thought it was important to make those distinctions. But to start, I want to talk quickly about the Facebook pixel basics as part of what retargeting really is about. Because in the Facebook world, the pixel is incredibly important. I know many of you have probably already set this up, but I think it's important to really understand how it works. And if you're newer to this link that I've shared with you essentially has all of the information that I'm about to share. So I pulled this directly from Facebook itself, their whole website about, how this works. So as I mentioned, retargeting is really about focusing ads on especially people who visited your website already, and then sometimes people who have already engaged with you somehow digitally, especially in the Facebook sphere or through email. The Facebook pixel is really what unlocks your ability to connect with your website traffic. So that's really what the pixel is. It's a piece of code for your website, and it lets you measure and build audiences for your ad campaigns, especially those who have visited your website in the past. And the Facebook pixel has continued to evolve as everything else does in the Facebook world, but it has a few key things that it allows you to do. You can measure cross-device conversions, so you have ads across different devices, and you can kind of see how that is working and flowing. You can optimize delivery to people who are likely to take action, so you're basically ensuring that your ads are shown to people who've already been on your website and are aware of you. You can create custom audiences from those visitors and even show dynamic ads. So especially if you're product based, you can show people ads for products that they have viewed on your website or products that are related to what they have viewed. And then of course you get a number of different pieces of tracking information and insights so that you can understand how people use your website when you're looking at your Facebook pixel dashboard. So the pixel has a lot of different functions now that it's playing, and inside of the Facebook ads manager or the business manager, if you're using it, you can see this information and learn a lot about people. When you set up the Facebook pixel, if you have a plugin or a module or something of that nature that you can use, it's usually fairly simple from a technical standpoint. Of course, if you are not very accustomed to working on your website or adding code to your website in any way, all of that kind of stuff, it may get confusing, especially if you are adding the events that you want to track. And we're going to go into that in more detail in just a moment. But you may need your web designer or developer to help you make sure that every part of the pixel is set up correctly. So that includes installing the code, but then also creating the events that are the specific conversions that you want to track. So, you want to be prepared for this depending on your skill level. I have some students and some clients who've been able to do a lot of this themselves. They're using pretty simple custom audiences. I have other students and clients where they really want to track very specific conversions, or what Facebook calls events. And as you start to get into all of that, it can get a little confusing if you're not familiar. So again, if you click the link that I'm sharing with you today, Facebook really explains this in detail. So the biggest thing that I think comes up around retargeting on Facebook and Instagram and the conversion factor is really understanding the events that you have to set up that you want to see. And this is something, again, that in our previous digital drop-in with Michelle, she kind of talked about in more detail, because she started sharing that she has set up different things to track different activities within her shopping cart. So here you can see is Facebook's list of what they call standard events. These are things that are kind of built into the system. They don't require as much extra work as, let's say, a custom event. So if I want to track something from a custom perspective, I can do that as well. But there are standard events that Facebook has built into the platform because they know a lot of people are going to potentially use these types of conversions to quantify their success. So events are really just the actions that happen on your website, like when somebody makes a purchase, or you can see there's an option to donate. So if you're a nonprofit, that's your number one most important piece. And to track the event, you have to place a piece of code on your website so that Facebook can understand that someone has taken this action. So that's where we move from just having the pixel to having these specific events coded in so that your Facebook pixel can track those particular events. There's two types of standard events. One is called tracking an event on a page load, and one is tracking an event on an inline action. So you'll see this in your system when you're in there. And essentially it's just the difference between, I might want to track whether or not someone lands on a conversion page or a confirmation page, as a conversion. I might want to, track that they sort of land in a space on my website. When that page loads, that triggers the event. But I can also track things like a button click or an add to cart click, something that is actually somebody clicking on something. And that is basically what we call the inline action. And then around these two things, you'll notice inside the ads manager that you have to set parameters potentially. So there are a number of different parameters that you can add, and you can input variables that are more dynamic, as we mentioned before. You can assign values to different things. So this is where, you start to get more advanced in the conversion aspect of all this, right? So we're now tracking really specific activities on the website that are important to us. And this is easy when you think about an online store because of the nature of e-commerce and how there's lots of clickable conversions. When you're service-based, I think it's a little bit different because you have to kind of create those opportunities for people to convert into a lead. So that could be a click to download something. That could be clicking to sign up for something. All of that stuff, is lead generation as opposed to an actual sale in the system. And this is where I see that sometimes you might want to have, assigned conversion values for different things. Those might be estimates, but they're going to help you quantify different levels of your success. So you'll see when you're in there that it's going to ask you about tracking events on page load and tracking events on inline action, and then ask you to set some of those parameters around what you want to actually understand about what people are doing. You can also create custom conversion events outside of those standards. Now, I know this little table on the right looks kind of like just a bunch of code information. So if you're not familiar with that stuff, it might not make complete sense. But this is where I can dig even more deeply into my own website and what I want to see happen. So let's say I wanted to know how many people were operating within a certain category of my store or a certain category of my blog. Maybe I want to see tracking around different product IDs or SKUs is what they're called. Maybe I want to see things related to product names, or I want to see the number of times a checkout was initiated as opposed to completed. They even have custom events related to lifetime value. So if you have come up with some sort of idea of what the lifetime value of your customer is, you can provide that as a custom event inside the system and look at conversions from these sort of higher level perspectives, or even sometimes more specific perspectives. This requires a little bit more work, and Facebook really does outline exactly how to set these up. Again, for a designer or developer, it's probably pretty straightforward, but it's really interesting to me that they really keep evolving this forward as far as conversion tracking, because I think for Facebook, they want us to spend the money on the ads, and they're realizing people are getting more and more savvy about whether or not they're getting a return on that investment. So when you are really worried about ROI and developing an understanding of what you're getting in return for your ad spend so that you can know that it's really worth it, this is where I think setting up the events is incredibly valuable, and it can kind of really take you up to the next level of understanding how well your campaigns are working. The next part of really retargeting and doing this sort of conversion piece, like I said at the beginning, is related to custom audiences and really understanding the difference between targeting people that have already had a touch point with your brand versus targeting people that have never heard of you or seen you before. So custom audiences, there are really kind of 4 main types that are important to consider. The first is basically custom audiences that you build from a customer file. And this is essentially when you have some type of tracking system for your customers, you have some sort of database of your customers with information there. And usually you have at least their email, their phone number, or some type of ID associated with them and their, what they've been doing on your website. So sometimes, again, with e-commerce, as you complete a purchase and you've been on the website, you get an order number, you get kind of a customer ID that you can be identified by. The customer file audience can also target newsletter subscribers, app users if they're signing up for your application. And you can see from the screenshot on the right, there's actually 15 different identifiers you can use. So people are most familiar with email, I think, as commonly what's being used. Again, if you're tracking apps, then you might have the app IDs, and then phone numbers are another popular identifier. But you can also use first name, last name, zip codes, cities, all of that to build this custom audience. So if you're doing deeper CRM work, if you have custom relationship management tools that you work with where you really are building a strong database of your prospects or your already existing customers, then you're going to have the ability to build these customer files. The next one is really the custom audiences that come from your website traffic, which, like I said, the pixel is instrumental in helping you build this custom audience. And essentially this allows you to just deliver ad campaigns directly to people who've already been on your website. And you can see here again from this drop down in the screenshot that it's not just your website visitors in one big pile. Mm-hmm. You can also be more specific.
This is what makes it so powerful. You can target all past visitors of your site, but you can obviously see here, you can target people who visited a specific page. You can create separate campaigns for people who looked at different sections of the site. Now you have to have a lot of traffic to be able to do that, because technically I think you need to have about 1,000 people in the audience to use it, and that's over a 90. I think the maximum look back is 90 days or maybe 180 days. It's one of those.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like last time I looked it was 90, but it might be longer now.
It's I believe it's 90, which is 3 months. So basically, if one page of your site, and I think it says web pages, so you can put in the list of pages. So for instance, you could say, okay, JB Media might have a couple of pages and a couple of blogs about SEO. So we could do an SEO campaign about a new SEO service and target people who looked at the SEO pages. And I think it would just be one page. For e-commerce, it might be like people looked at a certain category of products or a specific product. Or you can say people looked at a certain product but never made it to the first step of the checkout. Mm-hmm. They never got to the cart page or something like that, or the checkout page. That's how you do that, the third option. And you can also say people who visited but it's been at least a certain number of days since their last visit, so you can just bring people back as well.
Yeah, and just relate this to service-based stuff. This third option, people visiting specific web pages but not others. I've definitely used that in the past when I had clients who were promoting a specific piece of content, so an ebook, a guide, a major thing that they'd worked on, and we had a great landing page about that specific piece of content that we really wanted people to download. And so we could really see people hit the page, learned about the download itself, but then they didn't actually make it to the download page, mm-hmm. right? So they didn't actually get the free item we were giving them. And so that allowed us to go back and say, are you sure you didn't want this free thing, that you looked at and considered? And we saw that we were able to increase a little bit of the response. We didn't get a huge response. Some people just decided they didn't need that content. But we usually saw an increase in about 10% more people went back and downloaded that free option that had not downloaded it before. So it meant we were able to generate a few more leads potentially through that than what we had been without kind of retargeting them with that messaging. So again, this will be built right into the system like you see in the screenshot when you're building out this custom audience. And I think people who visit specific web pages, like Justin said, it's really valuable to start thinking about the things that you want to promote and the way that you've built your website out to support those different services or products. Again, in the product world, it's really easy and natural to have product categories, product pages, things like that, because it's literally the way that the stores are laid out to function. From a service-based perspective, though, a good example would be I see a lot of websites out there where they're not separating out their services into really strong pages about each service. They'll have a longer scrolling page with all the services on it. And this is why I kind of argue sometimes that I'd rather each service had a really strong place to live so that we could really see how many people are interested in that particular thing and target them specifically with ads that relate to that service, instead of targeting them with an ad that is more broad about everything you do. Because again, if we know that they are interested, like Justin's example, in SEO versus social media versus advertising, we can deliver ads to them that really speak to that and not just to, let's say, digital marketing in general. So I think thinking about this perspective of the campaigns also helps you think about how effectively you're really building your website and organizing your website, the flow of your website. If you're doing mobile apps, there's a whole way to create custom audiences from app activity. And this, of course, is very relatable to websites and the traffic you have there. But essentially, whether you have an iOS or an Android app, you can set up Facebook to target the audience that is engaged with that app. And you're going to have to go through some processes of registering the app and setting up the app events, because it's the same thing that we talked about with websites, where if you want to track conversions on your app, you have to make sure those events are set up clearly. But then you can target ads to people who have done specific things in the app, and you can also select a time frame for those events. So just like what we saw before, you can do that same thing and say, people who have done this thing in this time frame, we want to deliver an ad to them now about this topic. And it can be really, really helpful, I think, especially because these days, if you're building a mobile app, the biggest hurdle is getting people to care about it and utilize it. Even if you get the downloads, you then really need people to engage in the app, because it doesn't help you if they have downloaded the app but they're never touching it, never engaging with it. So this becomes a really powerful way for people who are building something like that for their brand to make sure that they can focus it and really promote it to people. And then you can also, within the system, build custom audiences from engagement. So you can target users that have engaged with your content on Facebook, whether they viewed a video or liked a page post or something like that. And again, we see this as something that allows you to really target people that were inspired enough by what they saw on your Facebook page to do a smaller action. And the goal with these ads is really to take them to that next level where they convert in some way. So you can see the options here in the screenshot as well. You can target everyone who engaged with your page, but you can also hit really specific people. So people who've engaged with posts or ads, people who've clicked your call to action button, people who sent a message to you through Facebook Messenger on your page, and people who saved your page or a post. So those, I think, are really interesting things to consider, again, targeting, because sometimes we don't think about all of these different ways people connect. Sometimes we think just about those likes or those hearts, or maybe comments, but I feel if someone has clicked your call to action button, depending on what your call to action button is, you can definitely come back to them and try to say, let's follow up with something else. Because they have taken a bigger step, whether they've called you or signed up for something or whatever it is that you've set up to that call to action. And it's funny because I actually do a lot of saving. I'm one of those people who's on social media a lot, and I'll see something I want to read more personally, but I can't do it during work. And so I save things, and it's been very interesting to me since I started studying a lot of this stuff to look at the ads I'm receiving and think about the ones that I'm getting because I save these different pieces of content. So I see we have a question just from Jim. Jim, yes, you will get the slides as well as a recording of all of this. So you don't have to remember everything we're talking about. You'll be able to view this, click the links, and look at the screenshots as well. But again, I think this all goes back to targeting ads to people who've really had this touch point with your brand, which is just a very different level than starting from scratch, building saved audiences and kind of going after people that have, not as much recognition, or where only a percentage of them would have recognition of your brand. So, think about, when it comes to custom audiences, what's most important to you, and think about who it is that you think are really going to be potentially the best prospects or customers, and think about how you can target them through these different types of custom audiences. And for the record, Justin brought up a good point about audience size. And I do have a slide about that at the end where we'll talk about what sort of the standards are when you're building custom audiences, because there are some basic standards that I think most of the experts agree on. So the final piece related to custom audiences that I want to talk about is lookalike audiences. So Facebook lookalike audiences let you reach out to people who are similar to your existing customer database. So essentially, when you create a custom audience, for some of those custom audiences, you'll then be able to create a lookalike audience. And again, you can see in the screenshot on the right that essentially you can then target different things within a specific country or a specific location, related to the size of the audience. So this is something that I think is a really powerful tool. And Justin, do you want to talk a little bit about your work with this and, how you've seen this play out?
Yeah, sure. So as Sarah was describing, lookalike audiences allow you to use Facebook's deep knowledge and data about their users to try to find people similar to an existing audience. And there's quite a few different types of audiences you can use as your base. You can use actual customers and using an email list, upload your actual customers. You can use a pixel on your conversion page, which is basically a customer or someone who's gone through the lead, to become a lead at the very least. You can go broader than that. You can retarget. You can look at like your whole website traffic, your entire newsletter list that doesn't customers and non-customers. You can even go. You can do your Facebook fans, and you can even, I believe, you can target the lookalikes of the fans of other pages as well. So it gives you a lot of options. Obviously, if you're lookaliking the fans of a competitor, they're not going to be probably quite as good of a list than if you use your own customers. But that's basically all those different options. One thing to note about lookalike audiences, you have to start with a country. And you can put multiple countries, but you start with at least one country as your base. And then you can choose how broad the audience is, anywhere between 1% and 10%. And that is of the entire user population of Facebook in that country. So in the United States, really the smallest lookalike audience is usually around 2 million people, which is a pretty big audience. For some niche businesses, there may not even be 2 million target customers in the whole country. But at least it'll be, the 2 million people that they start with would be better than starting with the entire U.S. Mm-hmm. It's a much more refined list. And then you can, once you save a lookalike audience, you can use the Facebook audience builder tool to refine it further. So you can say lookalike audience for the whole U.S., but I only want to target people in North Carolina who also are interested in these other specific things, and that'll narrow it down. And you can get down to an audience that's the size you want. So if you have a campaign with a budget that really feels like you have enough money to really thoroughly target 100,000 people, you can still use a lookalike audience. You probably want to add some additional filters to get it down to the size you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, I think this is a really powerful tool just because, as Justin pointed out, I've definitely seen some really great results come from uploading an email list of customers or potentially tracking the website visitors and then creating lookalike audiences off of those two things. Those especially I have seen just produce a lot higher engagement rates with whatever we were advertising, and typically at least a small percentage of higher conversion rates. So again, I think it's because Facebook has so much knowledge about the users on Instagram and Facebook that it really does allow you to kind of, it's basically going to crunch sort of the overall, characteristics of your existing list or your existing website traffic, and then try to find people that are very similar to that piece. And so, in a lot of ways, I feel like this is a really magical part of the Facebook advertising system that they created. So, like I said, you do have to, I think it's more important in the beginning to start with that custom audience piece and really, set all of that up, start to use some of those custom audiences, because that step does need to happen before you can even enter into the lookalike audiences and make use of that. So there's a few pro tips I want to discuss before we open up just for general questions about Facebook and Instagram advertising. And one thing I do want to clarify, just in case it wasn't clear to everybody, the Facebook Ad Manager allows you to run both your Facebook and your Instagram ad campaigns. So a lot of people are very familiar with boosting posts on Facebook. They're also familiar with going to their Instagram business page and promoting directly from the app. So certainly with what we're talking about today, with the custom audiences and the lookalike audiences, using the Facebook pixel and setting up your conversion events, I think a lot of that really needs to be done from the bigger ad manager, whether you're using just the regular ad manager or the business manager. And that's because it's just, you're going to get the full view of all the tools in there. I think it's going to be, there's really in those shortcuts from boosting and promoting directly from Facebook and Instagram, you don't get all of these options as easily built into that part of the system. So it does require that you go into kind of that bigger view. And so, Ashley, I see your question. In uploading a newsletter list to Facebook, does that violate GDPR? Do you want to jump on that? Or
if your list contains people who live in the EU, European Union, then yes, it would. If they didn't opt in to receive advertising, which very few people actually ask people to opt in. Most opt in say, I would like to receive emails, and then you have their email address for the use of emailing them. You have to, technically in the GDPR, you have to say, I'd like to receive emails, I'd like to receive ads, and those are separate checkboxes. People are opting in to seeing advertisements about your products and services in the future. Very few people would actually opt in for that. So that's, there's a big, honestly, Facebook taking a pretty big hit in Europe with their remarketing because of that. But the GDPR doesn't affect U.S. citizens. So if your marketing is mostly in the United States, it doesn't affect you. Now, there are some regulations that are coming out, including one that was recently passed in California, which hasn't gone into effect yet, but it has passed. And I believe once that goes into effect, then you'll be violating that policy, that regulation for California residents. And now we're talking a little bit more challenging because that's part of the United States, and then that could start being passed in other states, and eventually at the federal level in the United States. So I'm not sure if it'll ever pass the federal. It would not pass until probably there's Democrats running, both sides of of Congress. But there's been talk about it for sure. There's already some drafts in the works for that in the U.S.
So, Ashley, I just want to make sure that answers your question, because I think what it comes down to is currently, in this moment, while we're talking about this, knowing that this stuff is going to change potentially, if you are not engaging with customers in the European Union, then, you can upload your list as long as you know exactly where those emails or those people are from. This sort of reiterates the importance of having a larger customer database where you have more than just an email and a name from people. From the Facebook perspective right now, again, they would kind of say, if you are collecting emails from people for your business on your website or somewhere else, that it is your responsibility as the business to make sure that you are following all of the GDPR regulations if they apply to you.
Facebook, when it comes to remarketing, if they are now, they'll ask you some questions when you try to set up remarketing about if you have permission to remarket to your list. And that would, since they probably handle that differently country to country. In the US, I think they're asking people to have a terms of service that lets people know that they're using a cookie to track people on the site for the purpose of advertising to them. And so Facebook is cracking down on that a little bit, even in the US.
Yeah, and so I think, one of the things that you want to make sure of is that you've reviewed GDPR, seen how it applies to you, and a lot of us, even if we are not connecting with leads and prospects from or customers from the EU, we're realizing that we see this move in the US that might be going in this direction. So you'll notice a lot of companies have added that alert that Justin's talking about, where they have a statement that says, we are tracking you with cookies. This is what we're doing with the information that we receive. And when you land on the website, that pops up and people have to accept it as they surf through your website. So you do want to make sure, I think, all of that is in order and correct. And I've worked with a few different businesses recently who have customers all over the world, and we went ahead and consulted with a lawyer, about what exactly needed to be done to the website to make sure that they weren't violating anything in the process of collecting information from the people on their website. But again, let us know if this doesn't completely answer that question. I know it's sort of long and involved, and like Justin said, as the United States considers embracing this type of thing, it's going to be interesting if it starts happening on a state-by-state basis before it starts happening on a national level. And I think Facebook is going to end up having to evolve themselves forward to deal with that situation as states start to go one by one, like California is right now. And Jim, I see your question. What are some good books or websites to learn about this? Does lynda.com have courses on this? Quite honestly, I don't know if lynda.com has courses on this. I'm sure they do. I have just never taken them. If you go through this, you'll see all of these links that I'm sharing with you. These are the links that I'm going to represent or recommend as being really some of the strongest. So the first section has Facebook links directly to their system about how the Facebook pixel works and how custom audiences work. And then there's this awesome website that's at the bottom of these slides called Ad Espresso. And it's actually a tool that I'm a really big fan of, but they have tons of free educational information as well. So those are kind of my favorite areas to go and really learn about this. Here you can see again, there's different parts of the Facebook kind of help and developers section that give you a lot of information about this. So I would suggest starting maybe with some of this information, because all of these screenshots came from Ad Espresso, and I feel like they're pretty easy to follow and they have a great reputation. But I would definitely say you could look at lynda.com. I believe Udemy might have some of these types of courses. I think the key thing that you want to pay attention to, I do know Neil Patel, who I mentioned at the beginning and linked to his website. He has courses around these topics. If you go to that link from Neil, basically on that first slide, you click on Neil Patel, you'll get the whole article that he wrote about retargeting and remarketing. And he has tons of links to other things that he offers there. And of course, this is part of what we teach at the Institute. But essentially, I think, start with these links. Then, maybe look at Lynda, look at Udemy. These links will give you more of a kind of solid understanding of what the options are and what you may want to dig into. And then you can go and kind of look, more in depth at the courses that have video content and kind of dig into what you want to learn. And then Lauren, I see your question about, is there a module in the course that you're having? So I'm not sure which course you're referring to. Are you referring to like our intro course or maybe our main program? We do have some classes in our main program that cover custom audiences and cover overviews of the ad manager and things like that. It's hard for us to do any classes on conversion tracking, and I think you're going to find, the one that's $79. The intro course is more overview. We're not going to cover custom audiences in that course because most of the people taking it are not at that level yet, right? So, we don't have in that program specific classes around this. The other thing is it's really hard to do anything with conversion tracking and events because as far as classes go, like recording videos about that, the truth is websites are just different. And I feel like it's really hard to create a video that ends up applying to everybody's situation. And there's so many options. So what we do in our main program is we do have some classes by Laura, who works for Justin, where she shows you how to set up the custom audiences that are the more sort of simpler audiences. And then from there, our students, when they need help with conversion tracking, when they need help with lookalike audiences, we kind of dig into that with them. But that's only in our main program. But again, I want to just talk about these quick pro tips. And Jim, I see your question here. Website cookies are why I look at Kohl's.com at a toaster and then get Facebook ads for Kohl's toasters. Yes.
Basically. Yeah.
Basically. It's simple as
a certain type of cookie. I mean, cookies can be used for a lot of different things. Some type of remarketing cookie, some type of cookie that was used to generate remarketing, advertising. When you see exactly the same product, that's a specific type of remarketing. It's called dynamic remarketing, where by dynamic it is like, if you saw an ad for Kohl's after you went to Kohl's.com, it would be a static remarketing ad. If you saw an ad for exactly the same product, or even in the most extreme version of this, you might actually see a carousel of several different products that you looked at. That's using a pixel, and the pixel stores the product IDs that you looked at, and then it creates an ad just with those products, and that is a type of remarketing. That's the most advanced type of remarketing.
Mm-hmm. And I see this question, how do you avoid getting those ads following looking at something, as in what Jim mentioned? How can people actually... So what you're talking about is essentially, how can you not get the ads, the remarketing ads?
The easiest thing to do is disable cookies in your browser. That shouldn't do it, although... it's possible that you could still see Facebook ads because Facebook uses a combination of tactics, including cookies. So you might still see them on Facebook, but you shouldn't see them on other websites. If you use a VPN, the VPN cookies are little tiny files that are actually on your own browser, or actually they're in the browser's folder on your computer. So they're little text files where the browser can save information, but then later on, a different site can check that same file. So, for example, if a website has the Facebook pixel code, that gives that web page permission to save a Facebook cookie on your computer. That cookie is something that Facebook can access later. So when you're on Facebook later, it can check if that cookie exists, and then based on what's in the cookie, it can determine what to show you. It might be a long list of all the websites you've been to, and you can say, are any of these websites advertisers? Yes, this one is. Okay. What pages on that site did you visit? Okay, that's what ads are triggered. So I don't think a VPN really does much for you. Specific browsers have plugins for ad blocking. Ad blocking plugins look for code that wraps around ads and makes that content inside the ad invisible. So if you have good ad blockers in place that are constantly updated as the different platforms change the way that they display ads, you should be able to turn off the ads. And if you also disable cookies, you're adding another layer. Are you familiar with any other layers other than ad blockers and cookie deactivation?
No, I'm not.
You can on Facebook. You can also opt out of advertising being tracked. they continuously like update their terms of service and re-opt people in, but you can opt out of being tracked altogether. But yeah, those are different ways. There's different layers you can try.
No, not at all, Jim. We're in the question portion of the call, so you didn't get us off track at all. I want to make sure. I think it was Jan who asked the first question. Did that make sense about how to block the actual ads themselves? That you can do that by turning the cookies off, and things like that. And then Aaron, awesome. And then Aaron, did that make sense what Justin was saying about with the VPN? I just want to make sure that you followed all that and it makes sense to you. Yeah, awesome. Great, excellent. So the last few things, and please feel free to jump in with more questions because we've definitely got a few more minutes at least. The last few pro tips I put in here that I just wanted to cover is I have found personally, and anybody out there who's doing this type of advertising work, if you're already involved in it, you can please feel free to disagree with me at any time. But I personally have found, especially when you start working with custom audiences and lookalike audiences, that the Facebook Business Manager, which is sort of a version of the Ads Manager that opens up and unlocks some additional tools, is really the strongest tool to use. So if you want to really start focusing in on conversion tracking and on custom audiences and retargeting, I feel like the Facebook Business Manager is worthwhile because it's going to help you just open up the sort of whole toolbox that's available. And there are some audience building things inside of custom audiences where if you don't have the Business Manager, over the last 2 years at least, it'll prompt you to switch over to give you access to some of that stuff. So you might come across that at times. When you're setting up your events, choose your events wisely. I think that's a really important piece. Make sure that you know exactly how you quantify success and you set up those events so that you can really see the things that people are doing that matter most to you. And then I see a couple other questions here. Did you say that you need that 3-month traffic level to use pixel analysis, or is the high traffic level only for specific aspects of using the pixel?
Well, it depends on your traffic. So if your website's getting 10 to 20,000 visitors a day, which some sites do, you have the data within a few days to run ads. If your site's only getting 1,000 visitors total per month, then you probably need 2 to 3 months worth of pixel before you can being installed before you can do anything with it. So it's really depending on what you want to do with it. If you want to target every single person who visits your site, then you probably need to wait until there's been about 2,000 visitors, however long that takes. Mm-hmm. If you want to target a certain section, you have to wait till there's that many visitors in that section. The reason why I say 2,000 is because not everyone is on Facebook. Some people are not on Facebook. Some people have all these things disabled that we talked about. So you have to wait till 1,000 people are added to your audience before you can really use it. And so that means 1,000 people who are on Facebook and have not disabled ads. So you might need, it might only be 1,200 or 1,300, but depending on who your audience is, where they live, how popular Facebook is in their demographic, things like that. So yeah, that would be that answer. And then the pixel performance, I'm not super familiar with that, but it's inside of Facebook Ads Manager or the Business Manager where you can see your pixels and click around and see the data that they're gathering, right?
Yeah, they basically have inside of the Ads Manager what they call the pixel insights. And especially if you set up the conversion events to track specific actions that people are taking, you're going to see that it populates inside of those pixel insights to show you exactly which actions were taken. So again, if you go into your ad manager or your business manager, and I'm most familiar with the business manager, when you get into, that little menu, I think it's usually in the upper left, there's usually a section called pixel. And when you click inside that, it usually creates like a larger menu, sort of like a mega menu across the top of the business manager. And inside of that, you'll have a pixels section. and you should be able to click into there and see the insights. So hopefully that makes sense. Sandra, like I said, I'm sorry I didn't do a screenshot of that. That would have been a great idea. So thank you for bringing that up. I'll remember that for next time. But yeah, there's a whole section. If you go to the link that I shared for Facebook, for their whole section on the Pixel, if you kept clicking in there, they will usually give you instructions on how to access that stuff. So yeah, the ad manager is a little confusing to navigate, and this is something I think that a lot of people experience, so that's not just you. Unfortunately, because of the amount of things that are happening inside of the business manager and the ad manager, I'm not so sure when we can expect Facebook to give that a facelift. So, that, like I said, those links at the beginning to Facebook where they talk all about the Pixel, I would really utilize that. They link a lot into Facebook's help where you can see step-by-step process and screenshots of things. But I think everybody should be prepared when you start working on the custom audiences and the lookalike audiences and the conversion tracking. There's going to be a little bit of a learning curve as you start putting that stuff together. So don't expect that if you've never really done it before or you're new to it, that you're going to be able to do it very quickly. I feel like you end up needing to spend some time clicking around, getting familiar. Sometimes you set things up and then it's not working properly. You have to go back in and make sure that it is, and that's normal. So yeah, I wish that we could say I thought Facebook was going to make it smoother, but I think they've got a lot of other things on their plate right now, and so I don't expect to see them altering that system or making it any easier to use anytime soon. I do think that'll come down the pipeline in the future, especially as we see what we talked about earlier, which is privacy and security issues come up. Then I think we'll see them motivated to make those changes. So the last thing I just want to comment on before we wrap up is making sure your custom audiences are large enough to work with. Justin has touched on this, but I did want to give you some sort of basic overview of what most experts say when I'm talking to them. Most people would say that you need at least 1,000 emails in your list to really make that custom audience worthwhile. They'll say that if you want to target engagement, you need about 5,000 fans. To really get the best results. If you want to use the Facebook pixel, they're often going to say you need at least 1,000 visitors a month on your website. So not everybody's hitting those numbers. And so that's why I think it's important. That doesn't mean you can't test something out and see what happens, see what kind of results you get. But you want to be prepared that a lot of these custom options that Facebook is building in for retargeting really do work better when you have larger audiences, so that the percentages of people that would potentially actually convert, if there's like enough in that closing ratio or those percentages to really drive sales and things like that. So thank you so much for being here, Erin. I appreciate you being here. I know Erin pretty well, so it's really nice to see some of you that know Justin and I on the call today. Again, thank you so much for the questions. I know it's right at 1 o'clock, so we want to go ahead and wrap up for anybody who needs to leave. I will leave chat up for a moment while we wrap up the call. So if there's any other questions, we are glad to answer them for a few more minutes. And when you get a copy of this, you'll see that we've included a list of our upcoming educational opportunities. So if you're in Asheville, consider attending our March 22nd boot camp. It's a half-day workshop where we're actually going to dig deeper into this. So if you're interested in getting a little more hands-on feedback about this type of thing, please feel free to join us. And if you would like to check out any of our courses, you can find out more by visiting some of these links that I've shared with you as well. But thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a great day. And we hope that you'll join us again next month for our monthly digital drop-in.
Thanks, everyone. Great questions. Great presentation, Sarah. I think it was really, great content and at a good level and really useful.
So I see the additional questions that are coming in here real quick. Jim, I just want to clarify kind of what you're referring to. So you're talking about using the AccuWeather app, that they can then deliver Facebook ads to you based on potentially your activity inside the app. The answer to that would be yes. If they have had their app approved by Facebook and they have set up different events that they want to track, then they can see what type of activities people are doing in the app, and then they could deliver ads to you based on that. Absolutely. And then Aaron, I see your question, is there a general range for what you should plan to spend when you're targeting a specific size qualified audience for, say, a 3-month Facebook campaign? Justin, do you want to share really quick with Aaron? I know you kind of have a little formula where you're thinking about the ad spend versus the audience size.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think, Aaron, that's what you're referring to, right? Is like, what is like the amount that you should be expecting to spend for a certain audience size? Like, how does that look?
Most people have a fixed budget and they want to know how many people they're going to reach, and therefore how large an audience they need to create. Most people don't have an unlimited budget to reach their audience. So I usually say start with the budget and work backwards from that. But it is possible to also determine what your best budget is for a certain size audience. And I would say this may have changed in the last couple months, but I have been saying basically to spend $10 for every 1,000 people you want to reach. So if you have a lookalike audience or a pixel audience of 20,000 people, you can spend $200 to reach them one time, and one time might be over the course of a few weeks. So if that's the size of your audience, $200 might last you a couple weeks in reaching them pretty well. If you want to reach them more than once, you got to double down on that. Probably change up the creative a little bit. But if you're also constantly refreshing your audience with new people, you're going to get new people to target every week. So you can, increasingly continue to invest that same amount of money every week or every 2 weeks if you want. If your audience is a whole lot bigger, then you would need more money to saturate it. On the other hand, if you have a fixed budget, you might want to use filters to get your audience down to the right size so that you're not shouting into a really crowded room, but getting it more narrowed down so you can hit the same people more than once and have the right amount of frequency to see results.
So yeah, Aaron, does that make sense, what we're saying? There's kind of different arguments for how you make this judgment, but I think in general, in the time that I've worked with Justin, I've seen him do some really great ad campaigns, and I think that his basically, like, even though I'm sure that formula expands and contracts depending on what your marketplace looks like, right, and the competition, at the same time, I think that's a great place to start, so it can help you put a budget together, and looking at just 3 months. Look at that audience that you want to target and how long you want to run the ads and kind of think that through. Well, like I said, if there's any other questions, feel free to chat them in. I'll be on for another couple minutes. But thank you guys for contributing such great thoughts today. It's really great.